Now, as we discussed about the different establishment procedures, how the functioning of democracy, how the division of powers happens, what is the concept of federalism, and how to understand democracy, the different forms of democracy, all these things, and the major role of political parties, what are the outcomes of democracy that we all have seen. Now, our focus of attention turns towards the final chapter, that is the challenges of democracy. This is the 8th chapter. What we have is the challenges to democracy. So, what are the challenges to democracy? As we all know, thinking about the concept of understanding what are the challenges. Challenge is something which is difficult to achieve. It's not that we can't achieve. Challenge is something like which is very tough to achieve that one, which may be a difficult task to reach to that one. But we can do that. So, the point is, what are the challenges of democracy? When we think about the challenges, think about the challenges. What are the challenges of the present day? What were the major problems that we have? What would be the possible solution for this? What are the next things that have to be done to make democracy a lively one? Before going into the details, as you all know, you have observed, like in the entire world, we have nearly 194 countries in UN, United Nations. So, out of 205 or 206 countries, we have nearly 194 countries being the members of United Nations group. So, among these, we have 120 countries who follow democracy. So, it is very clear fundamentally that out of 194, 120 are the democratic nations. The rest of the 74 countries are not following democracy, are not aligned towards democracy. They are having different various other forms of governments. So, it is very clear for us that the fundamental question itself comes that nearly 1/4 of the countries in the world do not follow democracy. Nearly the 1/4 of the countries in the world do not follow democracy. So, it is very clear and very evident for us that when it comes to democracy, or when it comes to the issue of the number of countries following or do not following democracy, following are 2/3, 1/3 of them still are in the starting stage of democracy. They need to get transformed from the existing form of government to the democratic structure. So, this is called the period of transformation. So, the period of transformation means like you need to have a clear transition from the existing form of government to the new form of government. So, the first challenge which you need to understand is transition. Transition means a system of change. From where do you want it to be changed? What is the system that has to be changed? How can they change? What are the major things that need to be changed? Major things need to be changed is the form of government. From the existing government towards democracy. Let us take few examples which we have around India. Let us take an example of Myanmar. In Myanmar, we have the military dictatorship taking over the power in the past 2 decades. So from the past 2 decades, they are still in the period of transition to come towards democracy. So it is the first fundamental concept is that they are not in a democratic structure. So in order to establish democracy itself is a big challenge for them. They need to fight the existing system in order to come across out of the reach, and then they can move towards to establish the democracy. The situations are turning completely changed and reversed because of the understanding of the situation. Now the point is, when we need to change, first of all you need to keep the military out of administration. The military has to be kept out of the administration. That is a major tough task for the countries who are in a position or a period of transition from the existing form of governments to the modern form of democracy. When the period of transformation is required, first they need to alert or keep the military out of the control or concepts of administration. If you can do like this, if you can implement this one, we can obviously do certain things. We can obviously get the transformation done. But until and unless military is kept away from this, you cannot expect them that we can have a rapid change occurring from this. Because when we see the examples in Myanmar, you can see the military taking over the entire control, where no other political party dares to talk even against them. Then, when it comes to Pakistan, most of the times military dictators only take over power in Pakistan. Most of the times military rulers force the leaders to conclude treaties. Most of the times military leaders only take the in charge of certain segments. So these kind of developments should be arrested. In order to arrest these kind of developments, the leaders or the political scenario or the political leaders should take a stiff stand that to keep away the military from the regular administration transactions. If this can be done, then it would become easy for them to have a transition from the existing form of government to the modern form of government. If this is not done, it leads to the revolts, outbreak of the anger of the people. We have seen this example in Nepal. In Nepal, when the king tried to have all controls under him and he suspended the parliament, he abolished the parliament, he did not want to re-establish the parliament, then it rose the anger of the people. They went for strike. Lakhs of people moved out of their houses and brought effect on the day-to-day administration of the king's palace. So they came outside, they started to showcase their anger. So this kind of movements will be repeated in case if you do not be able to control the military successfully. And the anger of the people would be turning into a severe state, where we have seen in Egypt, the people have revolted in a very larger manner. In Libya, the military dictator Gaddafi was overthrown by the people's revolts. So these kind of things all will be the major turnouts when we are not able to manage military properly. One day or the other, soon or the later, you may get to chase the anger of the people. So these kind of things have to be addressed very seriously when the modern world is being changing very fast. And also we need to understand that the major challenge of any democratic country is to reach to people. The major challenge for any democratic country is to reach to people. It has to be understood very clearly, because when we talk about the reaching to people, the point is the people are made compulsory to follow, to understand certain rules, certain guidelines in democracy. When the certain rules and certain guidelines are given in democracy and you are supposed to follow them, but you could not follow them, it means that we are in necessity to do certain changes. We must have certain clear pictures on what has to be done, because when I talk about the reaching to people, in reality, in practicality, democracy is a form of government which will be taken over by any of the political parties. So in most of the villages in India or any other village or agricultural backdrop country, people associate the government policies with the policies of the parties. They know government only through the terms of parties, only through the terms of the symbols. Let us take Congress. Congress is known to the common man only with the symbol of the hand. TDP is known to the common man only with the symbol of bicycle or the yellow color, or by the charismatic leader Mr. N.T. Ramarao. So all these things make a very clear picture for us that they are following or analyzing the political situations of any government basing on the party stands. They do not have a clarity on what a government is. They truly remember that parties do run the governments, but the fact is party once takes over the responsibility of the government. It is the responsibility of the government to ensure equality for all the people. It should not show any kind of favoritism to any sections of people or any group of people. This understanding has to be very clearly in depth to all the people. So the major challenge is not only for any newly established democratic country, but the most experienced countries and the largest countries in the world, USA and India, also do face this kind of challenges. And next, the major important thing what we have is the deepening of democracy. When we talk about the deepening of democracy, the democracy deepening has become very wide and very deep. Why it has to become very deep and very wide? As we discussed earlier, democracy is nothing but the best form of government of the modern day when it is compared with the previous forms or the dictatorship forms or any other existing forms. Why is it termed to be the best one? Because it provides opportunity for all the people to have their own say or understanding of the policies. If the people are not satisfied with the government, they can change the government or they can ask the government to change their stand on the policy, which makes it very clear for us that democracy is nothing but the clear representative of the people. But if people only do not have idea of what are their rights and what are their rules and what are the policies and what are the programs of the government, that obviously affects not only the government but also all the other segments which are connected with the people's day-to-day life. So it becomes very difficult, very tragic for the people to understand and analyze the practical situations which are happening in the government. So the deepening of democracy makes it very clear for the people to understand what actually the democracy needs, what you can do the best. The best is behave in a clear picture, give people the clear picture of what has to be done, what is the idea that has to be done. So these all things are very, very important and requires to be taken care carefully. If the deepening is not provided for the democratic structure, it becomes centralized structure where you have union governments and the state governments may getting limited powers, and when it comes to the local bodies, the local third tier system do not have clarity or powers, so which will get the maximum number of villagers, the maximum number of people getting interacted to each other. So these all interactions are must and mandatory in democracy. If the local people are not getting interacted and connected with the policies, then they would not be understanding what the state government is doing, then they may not be understanding or maybe far away from what the union government want to do. So these all kinds of things will definitely affect the situations and brings democracy into a question mark situation. So it is clear to understand that we must have a proper understanding of democracy, and it is the responsibility of the governments to make sure that every individual or every citizen of the nation also should be able to understand what are the policies and how does the governments work. So in this way, it is really a very tough challenge to make the uneducated people or the connectivity very less in the villages, to make them to understand what is a democracy, how does it work, what are the policies of the government and all these things. So communication network plays a very vital role in these regards. So when our concept is like thinking about the challenges, we need to understand first of all what are the challenges. When do we call this as a challenge? When something is really a very tough situation comes over ahead, that is called a challenge, which means that you need to put your entire capabilities to fight against that one. This kind of scenarios will bring for us a certain new developments and changes. Out of the 194 countries which are registered in the UN and have the membership of UN, but only 120 countries fall under the category of democracy. Nearly 1/4 of the countries do not fall under the category of democracy. And now in these 1/4 countries, there are certain kind of revolutions going on, certain kind of changes occurring, and that is called the period of transition, which has to be changed first in the form of the governing system has to be changed, where for to have the existing change of the government from here to the new form of government, we need to understand clearly the military administration should be kept out of the regular administration. Military leaders, military capabilities, military dictatorship should be kept away. Military should be at the disposal of the leader, but not to make the leader to work according to the interest of the military. That is really a major tough question now when it comes to this transition period. And then we also have the challenges coming up, whether is it able to reach to the people or not, whether the entire structural levels are understood by the people or not, really the deepening of the democracy is being taught to the people or not. If the people are not able to understand how the democracy works and how can they prove that we have a structural democracy at the union level, state level and the local level, then it becomes a really tough point for them to understand practically what is happening or what kind of decisions have to be taken. Then it makes the people to become just merely inactive citizens, rather than making them an active citizens. They turn into subjects rather than being as the citizens. Now, as we try to understand what are the major challenges to democracy, let us now to think about the different political reforms. When we talk about the political reforms, you get the confusion, like when we are discussing about the challenges to democracy, we should discuss about the democratic reforms. Why are we discussing about the political reforms? So the democratic reforms or political reforms are meanwhile the same structure of set of rules. The point is, when you want to bring changes in democracy, you need to bring political reforms. Political reforms are nothing but which brings the alignment to the democratic structure and the nature. So when the things are changing, you need to have a clear picture on what to be done and what has to be changed. Let us discuss this with an example. Earlier, when you used to make laws, like for example, let us take cricket. In cricket, the rule of LBW, that is leg before the wicket. The rule of the leg before wicket has initiated or stopped the tactics which are played by the batsman, the bad tactics which are played by the batsman. But when you made this kind of rule, the tactics of the batsmen were arrested, but not the quality of cricket has been improved. The quality of cricket will not be improved basing on this method. The quality of cricket will be improved basing on the coach, basing on the sportsman spirit, basing on the work style, or basing on the practice of the players. So it cannot be said simply that simply if you make the political reforms, you can get the changes in the democracy. And one more fundamental question what we all need to remember while we are giving anything is, the same recipe do not work for every curry. For every curry you have a special recipe that has to be done. So there is a special recipe for chicken, there is a special recipe for mutton curries, there is a special recipe for the vegetarian curries. So we cannot have the same recipe for all the curries, whatever you need, you follow the same formula for everything. So in the same way, we cannot give the same set of rules or practices to have for all the countries. Some may be appropriate for certain countries, some may not be appropriate for certain countries. So depending on the situation and depending on the scenario, it varies from place to place, it varies from situation to situation. So now the question is whether we are able to get the quality of output, the quality of democratic structure done effectively or not. When we are thinking about the problems which can be solved by bringing political reforms, see, when certain laws are passed, it has to be kept in mind that that should be an incentive for the political leader, but not be a ban for the political leader. A new law was passed in certain states where if you have 2 children, more than 2 children, you are not allowed to participate in politics. You are not allowed to participate in politics. This is a clear picture of what has to be done, because when many of the women are unintended because they are not having any right or any choice whether they should have how many children. So that has already been happened. Now if they want to be in politics and they have intention to come to politics also, this law makes them to be stopping barrier for them, because they cannot enter into politics because they have more than 2 children. This is really a tough thing. Let us have an example for a good law. RTI Act. The Right to Information Act, which came into force in 2005, brought us a special right, the special right to question the actions of the government, to ask whether the information seeking to anything, whichever the individual wants to know about the actions of the government, can definitely ask and get the information on that. So this act made us to enlighten the people on the way the government works. If there is any delay or if there is any kind of lapse that are going on, that can be questioned by using the Right to Information Act. So this is a good law. This provides or enhances beauty for the democracy. Now the point is, you cannot give the same kind of promises or same kind of suggestions to all the democratic structures, stating that these are the common for everything. You cannot use the same recipe for everything. The problem is there are different situations at different places. So the different situations has to be handled according to the local circumstances and the local needs. So these all are seriously has to be taken into consideration. That is the first point. The second point is, when you frame a political law or a political action has to be taken that reflects in the democratic structure, that reflects on the people. So whatever you want to do, make a law which adds beauty or which gets enhancement for the political understanding of the people, not on a question mark for certain sections of people. As we discussed earlier, the quality of cricket cannot be improved just by bringing certain rules and regulations. The quality of cricket can be improved by making the people or the players to participate effectively, the coach having a good trained coach, and all these things gets added beauty for them and also gets quality of cricket output. But when the quality of cricket output is not done properly, and if you don't have a proper coach, the players are not practicing properly, then you cannot expect that we will have the output clear or we will have the quality of playing of the games by the team. So the rules will not get the quality. So when the leg before wicket has been kept in the cricket, only the bad practice of the cricket batsman has been stopped, but not the way the batsman can act. The only way is it can be questioning him or it can be penalized him because he is standing before the wicket. So the point we have to remember is, when certain laws and rules are made, we have to understand the criteria that here, when we are making the laws and rules and regulations, that has to improve the quality, get the advancement towards them. In the same way, if you take an example for where the 2 years or the more than 2 children, if you are not intended to enter into the politics, that is really a doubtful law, because when you mix this kind of laws where the real question mark comes, because most of the people in India tend to have more than 2 children, obviously there is a question mark on larger sections of people who could not enter into politics. And when it comes to another example like RTI Act, the Right to Information Act provides a clear clarity on what has to be done when you need to get information. So the government laws or the political laws, when they are made, it has to be remembered very clearly that political laws should add boost up to the democratic structure. And we also need to remember one of the basic principle, that is political reforms leads to democratic practices. So the political reforms and democratic practices are somewhere interconnected with each other. When it is interconnected with each other, we need to understand that the political reforms or the political laws, political changes, political rights, whatever you want to bring, it will be reflected in the democratic practices. Ultimately, our target is to arrest the challenges to democracy, or to effectively deal with the challenges of democracy. When you are dealing with the challenges of democracy, the best machinery is to have political laws. But at the same time, simply just making a political law or a law cannot arrest any kind of situations which are in the undemocratic practices. You need to make the people aware of the situation. You need to make them to understand the situation. Then you can expect certain amount of change with the legal support of the law which is made. Let us take an example of the political parties candidates filing their affidavits. The political party candidates right has to be mandatory to file the affidavit. When the affidavit was made mandatory, people are forced to spend within that restricted amount of money. That is a political right where political practice has been implemented, which affected on the democratic practice. So when the law was made, the party candidates, whoever is contesting in the elections, has to have file the affidavit. The details have to be given, and afterwards there is a limit in the amount of the money that has been spent, and he has to register everything, whatever money he is spending, for how much he is spending, everything. There should be a list, and that is to be checked and verified by the election commission. This has arrested seriously the flow of money in the elections to a larger extent. We do not conclude that yes, everything has been arrested only because of this law, but the initiation of the law, which was made by a legal action, has made a good democratic practice to come up. The money that has been spent for political purpose has been become severely very less. So this kind of developments are required for us to have a clear understanding and to make democracy a truly successful one, and to make the challenges effectively, to accommodate the challenges and to address the challenges. So we have to remember the point here is that political reforms are leading towards the democratic practices. That's why when you use the word about the democratic reforms or the political reforms, both are used as the synonyms, because either you bring the political reform, it reflects in democratic reform. You bring the democratic reforms, nothing but you are doing the political changes. You are doing the changes in the laws. So that's nothing but these two are the synonyms which are used either case. So it is very clear for us to understand, when you want to think about the political reforms, you need to understand that you are going to change the democratic practices. Yes, we have various other set of rules as an example for us to discuss and understand what is actually happening and how can we get idea on the democratic challenges. Now, in order to understand the actual problems or how do the problems come up, let us do a case study on two different problems. One is a general scenario, what happens regularly, which everybody knows. Let us take an example of a challenge. What is a challenge? First, make a note of the challenge which we generally face. Let us take an example of doctors' absenteeism. The doctors' absenteeism means most of the doctors are not found at the particular respective places wherever they are posted. This is not just a talk or generally an observation. It is a report submitted to the Uttar Pradesh government. Now let's make the problem a little bit elaborate so to understand the actual what's happening or what is the problem now. Let us see here. UP government, Uttar Pradesh government Uttar Pradesh government took a report of survey on the doctors' presence in the primary health centers. So, when the doctors are asked or checked whether they are present in the primary healthcare centers, why doctors are not present in the primary healthcare centers means these primary healthcare centers are located at village or towns, small towns. So the primary healthcare centers are mostly located in the villages. Now the problem is most of the villagers are not able to get access to any of the doctors because 90% of the doctors are unavailable to the villagers. They could not find any doctor coming to the village at all. Doctors come occasionally there, and most of the time they spend in the private hospitals in the cities and in the towns, and none of the doctors stay in the villages. So this is a brief summary of the report given by the authorities to the UP government. Let us take geographically what is the location of Uttar Pradesh. How many villages do they have? What is the basic occupation of the people there? So geographically, the village UP is very large state. Sometimes it is 2 times the size of Bangladesh. It is larger than a country. So you can understand that the length and breadth of Uttar Pradesh is very wide. And when it comes to the administration or their backdrop of work, most of the people in villages, most of the people in Uttar Pradesh are having the backdrop of agricultural backdrop. So the Agrarian Reforms. So as 70 to 80% of Uttar Pradesh is 70 to 80% of Uttar Pradesh is completely village oriented, and this 70 to 80% of population depend on agriculture. So as most of the people depend on agriculture and most of them are lightly uneducated or have only the basics of education, and this brings us to the idea that maximum amount of population do lives in the villages. And actually also in Uttar Pradesh we have more number of villages in the count. More than 3 lakh villages are found in Uttar Pradesh only. So now the problem is, as they are not exposed to the lifestyle of cities, as they are not exposed to the town setup, it is really difficult for them to find out the problem of how to approach to the city. And even if they move to city also, they don't know that for which problems they have to go to the doctors. Even for small things, they approach to the private doctors who are practicing at the nearby towns and pay huge amounts. The government is spending crores of rupees appointing the doctors and making them to be appointed in the primary healthcare centers as a basic duty of the government to make sure that a good health caretaker is present in the villages for everyone in the village. But the actual scenario is completely opposite to this. So now this is the challenge for you. What should be made to make the doctors available to the people in the villages, especially in the primary healthcare centers? What are the suggestible methods? You can think of this and put it on the paper. Some of the possible solutions are given. I would like to enlighten on them also. But you still can remember the choice is that there is no right or wrong option. It cannot be judged that this is right or this is wrong. Any option of your choice can be given, but you need to give the reason for why you have chosen that kind of option for them, or why you want to make like that. Let us tell me like some of the possible solutions are, first one is it should be made mandatory for all the doctors to stay in a village for a stipulated period of time, and if they do not follow these rules, or if they are not participating or not being in this one, automatically it should be a question mark to them, like why are they not accepting this one, why are the things not going on in right, what is the basic problem that they do have. These all things have to be questioned seriously, these all things have to be addressed seriously, then only we can expect some kind of new changes, possibilities that can come. So the one most suggestible method or advice that can be given for the UP government when it comes to the issue of this doctors absenteeism, one is it has to be made mandatory for all of them, and compulsory they have to be present daily in the hospital. We have to take an attendance for them. We can advise that they should make a report or daily send a mail to make sure that they are present there, or what are their observations. We need to get the daily feedback. So all these things can make certain better steps. As I told you all earlier before also, that there is no step that can be said right or that can be said wrong. You can give n number of suggestions. I would like to give some of the suggestions which are noted down for us in the book. And some of the other suggestions is that we can also have the report by the village sarpanch on checking or understanding, or just put in words like whether he is coming or not. If the doctor is not attending on so and so date, what is the reason for that? So he can have a check on that, and it will also be binding for the doctors that yes, there is someone who is going to be vigilant on us, someone who is conscious on our attendance, someone who is checking everything whether it's happening or not. So these steps may also make doctors to be a little bit alert. And the other major suggestion what we can give is that like district officials should make surprise visits. The district officials like the district collector, the district health officer, the superintendent of police, any official who is in the administration side on the top level of the district, as it is the responsibility of the district officers to ensure that everything goes smoothly in the district. So they also can make a surprise visits to the villages, to the primary healthcare centers, and check it whether actually the doctors are present there or not. So these kind of few suggestions can definitely bring lot of change in the doctors absenteeism. So we can definitely arrest from 50 to 60% of the doctors absenteeism, and it is also be made binding on the doctors initially as soon as they enter into the study of doctorship, that compulsory they have to do a contribution towards the society by working in the villages for a certain period of time. So these all things can add up and bring down the doctors absenteeism to completely null or zero. This is somewhat my suggestions, what I feel, or what you can also quote some of your suggestions. There is sufficient place given for you in your books, so you can try out some of the examples, and you can also take some other problem which you feel like it has to be addressed. So just make down the note of the problem and try to jot it down. What are the possible solutions that you can do for that one? We would like to discuss one more problem what we have now, that is the political funding. What about the political funding that do we have? Is the political funding sufficient for everybody? What we have present now, or what are the other possibilities? We shall check out, and first let us try to understand what is the problem. Then we can do what are the necessary steps that can be taken up clearly. The other major problem, like why do we have these many issues when we have an efficient political leaders? The problem is, let me try to understand, make it clear for you, like what is a major challenge of the present day, not only in India but in the entire world. The major challenge is political funding. The challenge is political funding. The political funding means it's a report. Again, we can't simply talk on whatever topic you want. All the MPs, all the member of parliaments are having the property of worth rupees 1 crore or more. The word of the dialogue, which it clearly reveals that, like, when it is very clear, all the MPs, there is no exemption to anyone, all the MPs do have properties of worth more than 1 crore, which means like all are millionaires, billionaires. The question is, if this kind of statements reveal for us about the member of parliamentarians of a large democratic country in the world, in which 70% of people are still having their daily per capita income less than 10,000 rupees per head. So it clearly reveals for us that the percentage of people who can contest in the elections or who can participate in the politics depends only for highly privileged people. My intention in getting the highly privileged people means the people, those who are filthy rich. So only the rich people can participate in the elections. Only the rich people can contest in the elections. Only the rich people can bear all the costs or the things which are necessary to do in the politics. This is the challenge now. What are your possible solutions that you can suggest? It is really a tough challenge, because you can't say, I am not worried about a politician. Tomorrow, if the same politician, let us put the politician name X, he is funded or he is a filthy rich person, he comes into power, he acts around the way which he looks from his childhood. He do not know what is a problem, he do not know who is a common man, he do not know what is a village backdrop. He never has been facing any kind of problems or any kind of loss or value of money or anything. He was born and brought up with a silver spoon or gold spoon, and he has everything whatever he needs. So he does according to his own ideology. He do not want to understand what are the problems of a common man. So these kind of leaders are going to decide the future of 70 to 80% of the Indians who are working hard daily to earn something. So really it's a most important and crucial problem which need to be addressed very seriously. Now, the problem is, when you start to give the solutions, first of all, the government should take the initiative to bear certain amount of money as an election cost for the people, whoever want to contest. So this breaks the barrier that only the rich people can contest in the politics, rather than that poor people also, the person who is not owning crores of properties also can participate in the elections. This can be broken only by the government's initiative, that making like at least some amount can be sponsored by the government to participate in the elections. The second major thing what we can do is public finance. We can keep all the records of political parties. So the record of all the political parties should be kept outside to understand actually what is the political funding of the political parties. Who is donating for the political parties? How much are they donating for the political parties? How much ever they want they can donate, but it should be public. It should be clearly available to all of them, so that they can understand actually what's happening there, so that they can analyze what's happening for them. So these all understandings will reveal for us clearly what is happening for them. So this makes it very clear for them to understand what is the problem, what is the solution, what can be done better, what are the possible things that has to be made clearly. So all these things are necessary. Then when we talk about the other things of encouraging the common man coming into politics, the third or fourth point we can take as citizens' contributions. We can also encourage the citizens' contributions after making the records public to contribute for the candidates whom they like voluntarily, and that can be removed from the income tax. So once you donate the money for the election campaigning, that can be exempted from the income tax records. So these all things makes us very clear that he had certain kinds of clarity on what to be done. And this issue is not a turned out issue from today, because it is an open issue for every time. Because this is a scenario where most of the Indians do not feel like they are connected to politics, because politics is a very costly affair. Politics is something it's only for the rich people. Politics is something which can be done only or managed by only rich people. This kind of scenario, this kind of mindset has to be changed. This scenario has to be broken down completely. We need to invite the young and the poor people who know what is the value of the real life. They only can understand the problems. That is the reason why when the constitution has been drafted, there has been a clear specification of giving reservation for a certain categories of people in order to bring them into light and enlighten them, and to know actually what are the problems that are happening from that particular section representation. So these all are the efforts made by the constitution framers, but still it is not turning into reality. There is somehow we are lagging behind. So if the problems are not addressed clearly, it again turns to be a major challenge for democracy. So like this, you can put down your options, you can check all the problems which you feel that these are problems. Just note down the challenge, try to think and focus on what are the possible solutions that can be suggested. Once you start to focus on the possible solutions what can be suggested, that reveals for you the situation like, yes, we have a problem here, this has to be addressed. This is not only for democracy, it can be on anything. You can use this in your personal life also. You can connect it to a problem what you are getting in access to a situation. So what are the things that have to be done by me? What are my mistakes? What are my positives? So then you can correct yourself very easily. So please plan like this. And now we will try to redefine democracy. How can we redefine democracy? In our journey towards understanding the democracy, especially when we started it in the grade 9, that is in the previous year, we tried to understand what are the factors that provoked the people to turn towards democracy, like dictatorship, versus democracy. Once we understood clearly that dictators cannot be further accepted, because in the modern days we need to understand that everything, whatever it happens, it is for the benefit of the people. So today the governments should run with the guiding principle of responsible and taking care governments, or who tries to do best for the people. That is the reason why they are also known as representative governments. So when we talk about responsible representative, responsible governments means what? Responsible for whom? Responsible for people. Representative, whose representatives are these people? Here also the same, these people are the representatives of the people. So when we talk about the representative governments, when we talk about the dictatorship governments, there is slight variation here. Dictatorship is something which the leader wants to do. Democratic governments is something which the people would like to have on their side. It's very clear. So the leaders are elected by the people. The leaders will be given the choice to rule only with the consent of the people. So the underlying power factor for democracy is the consent or the approval of the people. the consent or the approval of the people. So these all things are the basic factors what we have decided. Then we already have clearly stated that we need certain specifications. We would like to understand clearly what the political parties do, how the election procedure works, how is the time period bound for elections, why is it mandatory to conduct elections after a fixed period of time, and how do really the people exercise their political rights. After discussing all these things, we would be able to understand the two basic factors of democracy are political parties, the other one is the elections. So neither political parties nor elections, any one is absent, obviously it would lead to the destruction of democracy. Either the elections or the political parties are delayed, but there is democracy. But in case neither the political parties are there nor you have elections, then you completely understand that there are no democratic structure existing in that particular country. We have also seen various struggles which are faced by the people. If you remember, we analyzed clearly how did the differentiation of people, the communities, the culture has been accommodated in Belgium, whereas it was not accommodated in Sri Lanka, which led to the civil war. So after having a thorough understanding on all these basic facts, now we can come to a conclusion that democracy still needs to improve. As we discussed earlier, democracy itself, when we understand about the democracy, first of all the challenge of democracy is to turn towards democratic structure. From the monarchic style, from the aristocracy, you turn out towards democracy. That is a fundamental challenge or the basic challenge. And once you turn into democracy, again you need to get some more challenge to be overcrossed. As the time passes on, the tests for democracy do not get end. Why they do not get end? Because the way you understand the democracy is a continuous process. It is an evolving process. You can't say this is the end of democracy. The democracy goes on evolving as the time passes on. So when the time passes on, when new challenges come up, new tasks come up. So depending on the tasks, depending on the challenges, you need to understand yourself what is actually happening and how you need to circulate them and how you need to accommodate them. In the examples of this Belgium or in Sri Lanka, we have understood clearly when you are able to accommodate them, you can successfully have a democratic structure. When you are not able to accommodate them and when you go for taking sidelines of any one group of people, obviously it would lead to some destruction in the society. Now coming to the point of conclusion, like when we come to redefining democracy, why do we need to redefine democracy? What are the factors that led us to think on the redefining of democracy? When we talk about the democracy, first point is the major concern: rulers should have full authority to take decisions. When I say rulers should have full authority to take decisions, because most of the times the political parties are controlled by the big corporate groups which are funding them whenever they need it. So this kind of attitude, this kind of the behavior which is in the present day society has to be stopped. The rulers means the people whom the real public has trusted on them and voted in the favor of them in order to get them into power and gave a free hand for them to rule the system, govern the government. But in actual reality, the things are not going in that way. They are sidelined. They are not being followed in the similar manner. So these kind of things has to be arrested severely. These things should not happen. This should be questioned strictly, because the rulers or the people who have trusted the rulers and voted in the favor of them, expecting that they would be good and benefiting them on a larger scale. But the point is, when the people have trusted somebody and these people are working for the big corporate tycoons, would obviously result in the destruction of the common man's life. So this has to be checked severely. The second major fundamental thing what we can understand is that through elections, the people should be given free and fair choice. So when I say free and fair choice, you may get a doubt, sir, we obviously have a free and fair choice, no? Why should we have a point again stating that we should have a free and fair choice? When I say that we should have free and fair choice, the point is free from any kind of pressures, fair in respect to the candidates. Fair means they should not be having any kind of criminal records, they should not be alleged of any kind of scams, they should not be having coming from the multi-business group people where they even don't know what is the problems that a common man do have. When you become a parliamentarian or when you become a member of a legislative assembly and you are born with a filthy rich and you don't know how does a common man face a problem and your name is involved in various scams, you are having some criminal background record. So all these things would definitely affect the administration and the people would not be able to trust not the leader but the democratic structure, because people start to question them and people start to misunderstand that this may be the real democracy, but in actual terms that's not real democracy. When we discuss about the different issues, like for example the current existing ruler is not working to benefit of the people, he is not up to the expectations of the people. Obviously we should have a choice in a free and fair manner to remove the existing current rulers. So this kind of things have to provide for us the true picture of democracy. So when the current rulers are not being given the chance, or when the people are not given chance to eliminate the current rulers, obviously it does not fall into the category of true democracy. As I told you earlier, the candidate should have a good and proper record. While these all things do matters, because if a leader of a political party is having with a criminal record and he is alleged with similar scam complaints against him, or like he is a corrupt person, obviously it would give a wrong impression for the people that he may lead the country also towards a corrupt practices. So these all have to be checked clearly. This is very important task on regards to democracy. And as I told you earlier, democracy do have certain limitations, but these certain limitations should be on the ruler's part. The ruler's part should be restricted with the constitution's basic rules. So the constitution's basic rules have to be questioned clearly, and people should be given the choice to elect the leaders freely and fairly. We should have a clear alternative. For example, if you don't like the existing rulers, you need to understand clearly that you are having a choice of the other alternative. And when we talk about the rules part, the restriction or the restriction coming, the constitution has provided for a certain basic rules, basic structure of the constitution, which everybody has to adopt it and follow that. When we don't have that kind of nature and attitude, it is very difficult to survive in that kind of structures, which is obviously leading towards dictatorship or aristocracy. So now the question is, how do you define democracy? We have seen the previous definitions of democracy, like rule by people, of the people, for the people. So, rule by people, rule of the people, rule for the people. When we talk about these kind of words, we feel like yes, really people are having a clear and they can definitely question the government. But in actual terms today, the modern democracies are not like that. They have turned into a different shade. The people are having just a mere choice of electing out of two anyone. That is the right to vote. Simply right to vote does not provide all the political rights, or just simply participating in the elections do not provide all the political rights. People should have a clear choice of understanding whether the laws are in favor or not. If the laws are not made in the favor of the citizens, the people should raise their voice and start to question the points like, why is this law made? Why is this particular article brought into existence? Why is this particular law being drafted against the interests of the people? This active participation of the public is very much required to make a democratic structure really a successful one. We do understand that the people do not have much time to understand actually what are laws, what are the existing things. They are very busy in everyone's personal life and they open their eyes only when the term comes, like when they are being affected with the laws which are passed by the government. If people are cautious and vigilant, which is one of the basic factors of democracy, then immediately the actions of the government can be questioned, and these actions, when they are questioned, government will have a chance in understanding what is the people's pulse. Once the people's pulse is understood, no government dares to go against the people's interest or the pulse. So it is very, very important for the public to react firmly when there is anything that is moved against the interest of the public. And why we need to redefine democracy is our understanding has gone beyond the basic structure of democracy. We have seen various genres of democracy, various heights of democracy, various struggles towards democracy, the gender inequalities and everything. So now it's a time to redefine the democracy and change the definition of democracy. The task is in your hands. One small logic is there behind the democracy. The actual functioning of democracy do really require certain basic qualifications, certain basic criteria. We cannot simply say that this country is following democracy just by looking at the political structure. We need to understand whether they have a multi-party system or at least two parties. Do they really offer a choice for the people to elect, and do they really provide an opportunity to dethrone the existing rulers with the constant periodic elections? So these all are certain things which we have learned, we have understood, we have analyzed through various examples to understand the democracy. So, democracy is the real-time experiment which continues to be evolving continuously as the time passes on. See, in the early 19th century, the people thought of having a government which was elected by the people. People had a wish or a dream to have an election or to have the system of governance which is having people imbibed in them, where people are well connected with that, where do people have a clear choice to do whatever they want. Like they like the leader, they would continue. If they don't like the leader, they would remove. This was initially dream. So once the democratic structure has been set up and people have decided to go with this kind of government, that came into existence is the democracy. When again, in the ancient period to the modern period, we have the diversion of the democratic structure from the direct democracy to the indirect democracy. Well, in direct democracy, you need to understand it very clearly that indirect democracy that was happening in Athens, Sparta, located in Greece, the Greece city-states. So the Greek city-states are nothing but small independent nation states which were very small. The population was more than or equal to less than 5,000 people. So it was very easy and very comfortable for them to gather, to discuss, to collect the opinions from all the people, then they would further proceed for that. But if you take an example of India or China or USA, where the population is in crores, and in India if you take in billions, in China also. So it is a very difficult and almost an impossible task to gather all the people, to collect their opinions and to proceed further. These all things are practically impossible in democracy, that too to have direct democracy. So the system has evolved into an indirect democracy, where this is an example of the direct democracy. The system has brought out an alternative called representative democracy. Or we also further call it as indirect democracy. So this indirect democracy or like representative democracy, it is very clear and we need to understand it that practically to gather all the people on the modern day, it's a very difficult and practically impossible task. So they decided to have a representatives for a group of people who would further represent them in the larger community. Let's take for example the states of Andhra Pradesh or Telangana, or in any state in India, we have elections for every 3 lakh people. We have one representative, the member of the legislative assembly, who represents that particular section of people in the state assembly. When we talk about the parliamentarians are the people who are representing nearly 20 to 21 lakhs of people at the parliament house. It may be in the Lok Sabha or in the Rajya Sabha. Do Rajya Sabha have indirect elections? But in Lok Sabha, if you take into perfect people's representatives group, they are representing nearly 20 lakh people. So under each MP, we have again 7 MLAs nearby coming into the different segment regions. So a state has a representation for 3 lakh people, whereas in the center we have for 20 lakh people, the clear variation of one representative there. So it's very easy to have representatives in the modern days. That is the way the democracy got evolved from the generations to the next generations. So democracy is from the great olden days. We have it from the times immemorial, like from the 4th century or the 3rd century BC. But in the modern days, the shape of democracy has changed. The complete structure has been modified. Today, people have become very active. Today, the people are having fundamental rights, basic rights, where they can question any actions of the government. If necessary, they can move to the court to check the actions of the government. So these all things are getting modified and added up for democracy. So the real beauty of democracy is understanding democracy and make the democracy getting deepeningly understood by the people. When we talk about people understanding democracy deepeningly, deeply, the word deeply means here is not the depth of the ocean or the depth of something else. Understanding practically how does the democratic government work. Is it just our duty finishes when we put on our vote and there ends the matter? No. Your duty starts with the time when you put on your vote. From then onwards, whom you are going to elect, whether the person is an eligible person, appropriate person or not. After the time passes on, how is the government is going to be formed, which party is going to take the initiative, who is going to be the ruler, who is going to head up the government, what are the policies that are framed, what was mentioned in the election manifesto, whether they were able to fulfill them or not. In case if they are going against the interest of the people, we have to question them, we have to put the public interest litigations, we have the opposition parties to address the issues. So these all things are understanding of democracy. Even today, after 60 years of India got its independence, today we have poverty in existence, today we have inequality in existence, today still in some villages we have the caste discrimination in existence, even today we have economic disparity between larger sections of people. So if truly democratic structure is in existence, why are all these problems not being sorted out till now? So it means that there is a still lack of understanding of democracy in many parts of India. We need to educate the people to make them to understand and get them involved in the democratic structure. This will make the democracy to be a true democracy. And your task is now to define the democracy, and you need not worry about how should be the democratic definition of democracy, because we don't know whether which is right or which is wrong. Forget about right or wrong. Focus on the definition of democracy and write in your own words, but be able to justify why you are using that particular words in defining democracy. If you fail to explain the wording of your definition, then it would obviously be wrong. Rather, if you are able to justify it, then it is 110% right. Your definition is your understanding towards democracy. So there is no dictionary meaning to define democracy. The dictionary meaning of democracy has been waived off. It's an old definition of democracy. You people, after you have a thorough tour for 2 years of understanding democracy, now I think you all are capable to understand what is democracy, what does it do, practically what are the possibilities, what are the negativities. These all you can understand. So the fact of understanding democracy is very clear. Only thing is, you should be able to understand how is the working of democracy going on practically. Take few examples, study them thoroughly, then come to a conclusion and put it in the words which are appropriate to the modern scene of democracy. So try to define it. There is no definition like good or bad unless you are able to redefine or give a meaning of the word for what you have used it. If you fail to give the meaning of the word for what you have used it, then obviously it could be a bad definition. But try to make a good definition for democracy. It is a valid point because after studying for so many units for past 2 years, I think you all can do it very well. So all the best, do it very well. So this is the journey of democracy, practically, fundamentally, basically. So all the aspects has been covered in this, and this could be giving you a better understanding of what actually the political scenario of India, political setup of India, political structure, rights, everything. It's clear for all of you. So it would be right for you to go further ahead and define democracy.